So super ships are now in random battles, and the one that's most surprised me is the Satsuma. This is a ship that I thought was just worse than the Hanover in previous iterations of these game modes, and that really comes down to there being less people. Ranked battles has just less people than randoms, and since we're on the live server, regular random battles, people play a lot more passive than they do on test servers and even, ranked battles that is now the live testing environment, let's be honest. So having a long-range sniper that's better over distance compared to something like the Hanover is actually really strong. And I've been having a lot of really good games in the Satsuma, so much so that it makes me want to play my Shikishima again, because these 510mm guns just hit so hard. We're just consistently getting these 20k salvos into this Freddy here, and this Brindisi is about to find out that, well, 2 salvos is more than enough to kill him. Of course, this ship's special gimmick is the 35% dispersion buff you get once you have, 3 accurate enough salvos, and you can push F or whatever keybind you've, bound it to, and you get 35% better dispersion. So when a cruiser goes broadside, it's probably the time you want to use it. And we already have 63,000 damage, and now we're at 87,000. So, Brindisi, welcome to your first maybe couple games in Tier 9, and you get to play against a Satsuma. Certainly not the most enjoyable experience for anyone playing their Tier 9s. I hate to imagine what some of these stock Tier 9 ships would be like these days. For example, the Seattle. That's going to be a rough experience if you're stock and you're fighting against some of these super ships. I'm not a huge fan, let's just say that, of super ships coming into random battles. It just makes the game even more passive. As you go up the tiers, the ranges get longer, the DPM gets much more, and there's just more spotting at those longer ranges. Your concealment generally isn't as good on these bigger ships, which makes sense. But the result of that is all of this damage comes in at much longer distances. And I think that results in more blowouts and much more passive games. The last few times I've streamed this game, most of the matches, nobody's really decided to push in, trying to play the objective. This game, we get a team that wants to push in on our flank, which is really nice. Part of that might be down to the massive amount of damage we've already done. You can see we haven't even actually crossed the 5-minute mark in this game. So 100k in 4 minutes, and that's including some of the travel time. That pretty much wiped out everyone that game, and the rest of it was pretty boring. So we'll move on to a couple good salvos I had in this one. But this is a great example where the entire enemy team just decides to play passive, right? The A flank on the enemy team is their weak flank, so understandably they're kiting. Our team is pushing there, but you would think then that they would be pushing at C here and trying to play aggressively, get some good ground, get some cap control. And that's just not what happened this game. And I've been on both sides of this, and it's frustrating on both ways. It really is. It just results in these games that are blowouts. One team gets all the caps, ticks up on points, or the enemy team then decides to throw a lot of their ships away. As you can see, that dispersion upgrade is very nice. Even on something like an Alaska that has a very underwater citadel, or at least waterline, I should say. It's waterline, but it's very hard to citadel an Alaska. Yoshino, though, broadside Yoshino is very vulnerable, so using our boost here to get a big hit off on him is definitely worth it. And these are 20-kilometer shots. The nice thing about the 510mm guns, of course, is they hold their velocity. They're really big shells. They're going to hold that velocity over long ranges. So they're really not too difficult to lead. Of course, we get a little lucky with people just wanting to sit broadside. But because these guns are so huge, you're going to get a lot of overpens. And it results in okay damage, but it really feels kind of unfortunate against some of these cruisers when they go flat broadside. So, full pen, he turns in. That's a smart play by the Rune. But he's going to turn out, and the Satsuma actually has a good enough reload to just barely catch a lot of these cruisers as they try and turn in. But yeah, that's the main reason I don't like super ships being added to the game. They just make the game even more passive through their longer range, higher damage output. And all of them are like this. The Conda, the Annapolis, the Hanover to some extent, they just force people to play farther back at longer ranges. And personally, I just don't find that as much fun. And the thought then would be, oh, just go play at lower tiers. Well, that's a whole nother problem for a different video, but let's just say it's not fun being bottom tier in a lot of these games. So that's why I constantly want to play top tier. And there's a reason that being bottom tier is so frustrating. I think it comes down to wanting to encourage people to continue grinding, to continue paying for premium time, to get that next tier premium ship, because they don't want to be that bottom tier player. I think it's designed to frustrate you into spending money. So yeah, I'll admit it. I get frustrated when I'm bottom tier. So that's why I want to play top tier. And top tier is now getting a little bit boring with these super ships. And that's why I don't enjoy their addition to the game. There's some really cool things. I think the idea of these situational upgrades that you kind of earn these buffs by having some accurate salvos, and then you get to time when you want your accuracy. Let's say on the Satsuma, right? We can nuke a destroyer just like that. And it's kind of nice having these kind of situational upgrades, buffs you need to play around. I think that's such an interesting, unique idea, and I wish they'd added it to some of the more standard tech tree ships rather than adding a whole nother tier on top of tier 10. I'm very, very nervous what these super CVs are going to look like. I think a lot of you have probably seen those, and if you haven't, well, let's just say jets are coming back into World of Warships. So even quicker spotting for this long-range damage to impact the game. So I think this is just an unfortunate situation where we're not going to see the kind of older playstyle where people wanted to play a little bit closer and wanted to push in more. And that's a result of everything I've been talking about, but also the player base is just getting better. I think it's funny, I guess, to talk about the player base being bad and worse than it's ever been. But honestly, people play much better now than they did 5 years ago. And you can really see it in people kiting away, trying to stay angled. Like this Iowa, for example. He's against a ship 2 tiers higher than him. And he, apart from the initial mistake of going broadside, where he got lucky to not get dev struck, he's played really well, kiting us away, trying to mitigate damage by being angled. Of course, Overmatch is incredibly fun to play against. But people are playing a lot better. Cruisers tend to stay angled more, use islands better. You see a lot of people playing their cruisers stern in rather than bow in. They're not getting themselves caught as often. Destroyer players are playing a lot better with their HP pools and spotting and torping lanes, that kind of thing. I think overall people have gotten better. And if you disagree, I would encourage you to go back and watch some of those really old videos from some of the original content creators, and you probably will see what I mean. Things have improved, and because of that, people are playing at longer ranges because it's more effective and efficient to play at these longer ranges and not risk your ship as much. So it's unfortunate. Satsuma is actually a really good ship, and I've had a lot of fun playing it, but it's unfortunate that now tier 9 and tier 10s are going to be pulled up into some of these games and are going to be forced to play at even longer ranges. So your brawling battleships, I don't know how good those are going to be anymore. Your light cruisers in these open water maps, they're going to be really tough to play. This one ended up being a loss, but we got 260k. Some of the other ones were less damage, but we got some wins. So for the build on the Satsuma, I'm actually running just the normal Yamato commander that I'm always running. You're wanting to take grease the gears, and other than that, it's just standard battleship. Kind of boring, but it's just the best way to play these ships. Secondaries could be interesting, but you don't get the improved accuracy. And let's be honest, the cheek is not the best in close range dealing with that. So I don't think secondaries is really going to work on this ship, even though it could be interesting with some of these 203s. I just don't think it's going to work particularly well given all the passive nature that I've already discussed at length in this video. As far as the upgrades, I think this is also pretty standard stuff. If you're wondering, cheek, of course, is the infamous weak point on these ships. And it just means that the Citadel is angled like this. And it means it's very easy to hit at an angle about like this by any battleship. And if you overmatch 32 millimeters, yeah, it's just, you're going to punch through in Citadel. This thing, it's about as much of an RNG fight as you can get, especially at closer ranges. But Satsuma's a great ship and much better than it was in these lower player count, more brawly game modes like ranked and on the PTS. So I think Satsuma is definitely really, really fun to play. I just don't like what super ships bring to the overall meta of the game. But let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.